Hello. I want to talk today about the idea of woke. Wokeness is a trendy idea today, but I want to suggest it's really a classic idea, has a long and venerable history. In other words, it's not just trendy. As my approach is going to be historical, let me start with some similarly historical remarks about why we're here today, that is for a May Day teach-in. First of all, May Day, what is it? Well, it's the International Workers' Holiday. It's celebrated as such worldwide, except in the US, where we place it by Labor Day. Follows on traditional celebrations of spring. I remember when I was a boy growing up in Germany, we used to do the maypole. Boys and girls would have the colored ribbons and sort of weave them in together around the pole. May Day has been celebrated as an international working day since 1889 in celebration of a demonstration in Haymarket Square, Chicago, 1886, with the 8-hour day. So this is brought to you in effect by the folks who brought you the weekend, the union movement. In America, May Day was displaced by Labor Day, and the 1st of May became Law Day, as in Law and Order versus the rowdy kind of politics that happened in Haymarket Square. Well, isn't it good to have a government of laws rather than of men to have Magna Carta and all of that? Yes, it is. At the same time, the point of celebrating May Day is to reassert also the value of rowdy, demonic oppositional politics in America. Second, teach-in. I'm old enough to remember when this was new. Wikipedia defines teach-in as a general educational forum on any complicated issue, usually an issue involving current political affairs. Good definition. That's what we're doing here today. Teach-ins developed in the context of the Vietnam War, 1965, the University of Michigan. There have been other occasions for them over the years. It's basically what we mean by a colloquium. It is an instance of engaging in learning for learning's sake. And so I'd like to thank Professor Wright for keeping this new modern tradition alive on our campus. We've been doing this now for a couple of years of May Day teaching. I want to talk today about three things: wokeness, its place in the history of ideas; secondly, whether we should think of wokeness as substantive or methodological; and third, what happens once you get woken. The phrase "stay woke" became popular in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement. The specific topic to which people became woke in the past decade was systematic racial injustice. We all know the names. Trayvon Martin from February 2012, the hashtag "stay woke" comes up in 2014. But both the phrase and the idea go back further. Leadbelly, the blues singer, in an interview about his song, The Scottsboro Boys, said, "I advise everybody to be a little careful when they go along through there, Alabama, when the Scottsboro Boys were arrested. They will keep their eyes open." 1940s, a Black United Mine Workers official, same people that brought us the 8-hour day and the weekend, waking up is a damn sight harder than going to sleep, but we'll stay woke up longer. In the 1960s, New York Times article by the Harlem writer William Melville Kelly, "If you're woke, you dig it," defines woke as well-informed to date. The 1972 play about Marcus Garvey contains the line, "I've been sleeping all my life, and now that Mr. Garvey done woke me up, I'm going to stay woke, and I'm going to help him wake up other Black folk." So wokeness didn't appear out of the blue in the last decade. Its core insight is much older, even as a common linguistic trope. Further back, it's a basic idea in the history of ideas. It just keeps getting rediscovered. What's this? A shadow. It looks like a man in a top hat with an umbrella. And normally we expect a shadow to be cast by something which resembles that shadow, but not necessarily. Are we just dreaming of shadows? This is a question that Plato asked 2,500 years ago in his allegory of the cave. If you know the story, a bunch of guys have come up in a cave, they've been chained to the cave, and all they can see in the dim light is shadows, and their jailers are kind of sadistic. They play tricks on them, move these shapes from the firelight to cast the shadows, kind of like maybe what you do with a bird on the wall. One of the prisoners breaks free, gets out of the outside world, and discovers there's much more than they ever imagined. He can see colors, objects clearly. He can see other people. He goes back into the cave to try to, convince his friends to break out, and they laugh at him. "You idiot! this is all there is. This is reality. This is Plato's metaphor for what happens when philosophers try to get people to wake up. The things for Plato which are least real are the things we can see or touch in what he calls this twilight world of change and decay. So the cave for him is a metaphor for the human condition. We all suffer from cave consciousness. Cave consciousness is a kind of sleep. Finding one's way out of the cave is a kind of awakening. Most of us walk about with our mind's eyes wide shut, according to Plato. Ordinary sense experience stands in the way of good sense. The lie distracts the mind's eye. Now, when he says this, Plato is standing common sense on its head, because for Plato, the real is the unseen, the seen is unreal. Consequently, most of us are deceived, ordinarily, thoroughly, and most of the time. People don't like to hear this, but it is the philosophy wake-up call, whether you read Plato or Marx or Jean-Paul Sartre or, who's this other fellow? Psychologists suspect that some people may be delusional. Philosophers suspect that all people may be delusional. Plato is the guy who started it. So his message is, join the Plato's Cave Alumni Association. Get out of the cave. You graduate, please. In the history of ideas, not everybody has embraced Platonism, substantive, and philosophy. It didn't end with Plato. Subsequently, other key philosophers have used the asleep awoke metaphor. Sometimes they've done so against the influence of Plato himself. Sir Francis Bacon in the 17th century, good example of that. Plato and Aristotle are just an alternative way of sleepwalking. We need to start over and wake up again. Also in the 17th century, René Descartes. What if we're still asleep even when we think we're awake? How can I be sure that I'm not dreaming even now? It's hard to tell the difference. Immanuel Kant, David Hume first interrupted my dogmatic slumber. You need to wake up again. And then, of course, there was this guy. We're sleepwalking as our pockets are being picked systematically. Sleeping and waking, then, has been a very powerful metaphor for the human condition, and that for a very long time, not just the 20th, 21st centuries. Okay, what happens with wokeness? Should we think about it as substantive or as methodological? How do you tell if you're woke? Because you hold the appropriate set of substantive views, or because you approach issues in a certain manner? Often those people who criticize wokeness, I cite Bill Maher as a key example, have in mind such things as cancel culture or deplatforming. It's as if there's some checklist of specific substantive commandments to which one must subscribe or else. But does this make sense? I mean, are you woke to the extent that you can tick off items, take a knee with Colin Kaepernick, get reparations, check, having a future, check, Black Lives Matter, check? Doesn't seem sensible. Maybe it would work for the opposite. Maybe you can check off wokeness, but we don't use checklists like this, for example. We don't say, you're woke if you agree with Plato on each and every item that he said. Because Plato woke to these issues doesn't mean is. This ain't woke. Creativity Corporation, thou shalt stay woke. Get back to that damn cubicle and start thinking outside the box. Christopher Hitchens has an interesting thing.
Further to the principles of free inquiry and open debate that go up to make a great university, my view is, and will always be, that it matters not what you think. Anyone can have thoughts. Many people content themselves with feelings. It matters how you think.
Yes, it matters not what you think, it matters how you think. So what if we think of wokeness as how and not as what? Methodological wokeness, in other words. Connect the dots. C Wright Mills, The Sociological Imagination, 1959, states a methodological case for wokeness. There are a number of cases that could be stated. I'm just going to focus on this one today. And Mills started by making a distinction between troubles and issues, personal troubles of milieu versus public issues of social structure. Often these two seem disconnected, but are they? Mills gives this example: marriage. Inside a marriage, a man and woman may experience personal troubles, but when the divorce rate is 250 out of 1,000 attempts, you're talking about a structural issue. He gives another example: employment. When in a city of 100,000, only one man is unemployed, that's his personal trouble. But when you've got 15 million out of 50, you're talking about the structure of opportunities having collapsed entirely. That's a different matter. Up to a certain point, Black people in Mississippi didn't have issues, they had troubles. Comes along the civil rights movement and it formulates these troubles as problems, as issues. Very different. Victorians were scandalized that working women were subjected to the troubles of prostitution. Well, as early feminist reformers were the first to point out, female jobs didn't pay enough to live on. Seamstress work was the most common occupation, and didn't pay the rent, put food on the table. Prostitution was the gig job, basically, in that economic situation. The woke imagination, methodically disciplining oneself to see the bigger picture puzzle that troubles aren't merely personal, but connect collectively to issues of social structure, historical change. In other words, connect the dots between troubles, issues. Now, Mills wrote this over 60 years ago. Yeah, I was in first grade. Should we read him today? This is ancient history. Or is there something to be said from Mill's point of view?
How can he close me up? On what ground?
I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on in here.
You're winning, sir.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes, like Captain Reno or like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. People are shocked to find that structure, policy, and issues have consequences for personal troubles. Let's think about homelessness. Is it a trouble or an issue? Well, you look at one guy sleeping on the bench, down and out because of personal fecklessness, maybe bad choices. He himself might even look at it that way. But, when city officials begin to wring their hands, oh, it's this terrible lions and tigers and bears, oh my. Is that really what's going on? Think about downtown LA, for example, the way in which cheaper housing is being leveled to build these Fotelian fortresses. Average individual income in LA, $2,300 a month. The rents in these Fotelians, 130% of that. The houses they displace, and these two pictures, by the way, were taken blocks from each other in LA, 65%. Still kind of stiff. The standard is up to 30% of income for housing costs. After that one becomes cost burdened. The older downtown LA apartments, double that, about 65. The new ones, quadruple at about 130%. And this is not just downtown LA. This is nationwide. 50%, 60%, 70% and more for housing costs is in many urban areas becoming normal. Cheaper housing gets torn down to build these Fotelian fortresses. The average monthly individual income, $2,300. The median rental is $2,400. Most apartments start at $1,500, and most Americans can't raise $400 in an emergency. In downtown LA, the minimum wage would have to be $30 an hour for an individual to afford rent. Psst, Dorothy, connect the dots. Shelter poverty. Is that a trouble or an issue? It's really harder for Black people to buy housing. Well, this is a trouble, but it's connected to the issue that there's a long history of redlining, shutting Black people out of FHA loans. This has had an overall effect on the imbalance of wealth. Surprising. So prime foreclosures, trouble or issue? Some people who did have homes lost them to the foreclosure following and actually preceding a little bit the 2008 economic meltdown. Many people lost their homes. This was due to neoliberal deregulation of banking and the unchecked ability to commodify mortgages. Student loan debt, trouble or issue? The average student loan debt, $30,000, can go as high as $200,000. There are many students today who aren't going to be able to start a family or to buy a home. Well, this trouble is connected to the issue that neoliberal policy has increased tuition by basically starving state revenues. Tuition has increased 1,200% since the time of Mr. Reagan when this started. Immigration, trouble or issue? Immigration is not just about the US-Mexico border, by the way. It is worldwide. Some immigrants die trying. Others wind up in cages and concentration camps. But this is about wealth disparity, a larger structural issue between North and South. So connect the dots between troubles and issues is one way of thinking about wokeness from a methodological point of view. And finally, what happens once you get woke? Don't go back to sleep. Yeah, Plato may have been the original woke guy, but they didn't stop its followers from hitting the snooze button. Woke ain't necessarily forever one and done. Is woke some new revelation handed down, one more set of thou shalt nots, or does Hitchens have the right idea that it's a matter of how rather than of what? If wokeness is methodological, doesn't it stand to reason that it's also going to be ongoing? Won't it require working at? So to sum up my remarks today, the idea of wokeness isn't just recent, it's not just some fad or passing fancy. Rather, it's a mainstream core idea, comes up in philosophy and social science. Indeed, it's part of what we mean by talking about critical thinking as a staple of getting a liberal education. It keeps getting rediscovered, and indeed it needs to be. So that's been my talk today on woke. My name is Michael Cavanaugh. For listening, and good day.